So I'm doing this video about the moratorium, and what I will start off with is reading a little bit of this. And for those of you that are not aware, there's a moratorium, and Los Angeles County eviction moratorium is what it's called. It was effective March the 4th, 2020, all the way to July 31st, 2020, and it said that it could be extended, which I believe it may have been extended, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. Extended by the board on a month-to-month basis. So that means that this moratorium doesn't cancel the rent. It basically freezes the rents. This is who I'm talking about right now is people that are in a rental situation where they're a renter of an apartment. And what it doesn't do is it doesn't cancel the rent. It just freezes it, and then it accumulates, and when the moratorium is lifted, evictions, back rent is supposedly supposed to be paid and due during that time. But the problem that they're looking at as this moratorium is helping those that need it is there's a lot of issues going on here. And this is the reason why I'm just going to throw it out there. These are people now. This moratorium is on a month-to-month basis, and it implements a countrywide ban on evictions for residential and commercial tenants and space renting, living in mobile home parks for non-payment of rent, and if the tenant or space renter can show that they have been financially impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. And that's what this is supposed to help people, so that in hopes that maybe they can save up some money or go back to work and save up the money and then try to pay as they go or work out some kind of agreement with their landlords. And there's a group that is trying to cancel the rent, and they want these rents canceled. They want it ended because their position on this is that they are not able to go back to their jobs, or it doesn't feel safe, like a safe environment to go back to work just yet. And they're pretty much, they've been furloughed or they lost their job and they somehow ended up behind in rent because of this incident. And so it says an expansion of the eviction moratorium will protect Angelinos for another month. And so this is a protester, and these are the signs that we've been seeing around Los Angeles, where they want to cancel the rent altogether because their feeling is that a lot of this wasn't the fault of the renters. This pandemic, and some people were laid off. Some of them cannot go back to jobs because the jobs have closed permanently. There are some issues behind, whether people feel safe going out back to some of these places, and some places are not open because they have been instructed to close. And so that puts a lot of people in a difficult spot. Everybody can't just sit at home and work behind a computer for their jobs. So some people can and others can't, and so that is what the issues have been. There's probably other issues as well. So Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors expanded Tuesday a moratorium on evictions until June 30th, but it's been moved even to expand more. I guess it's past June 30th. It was July 31st, and now I think it's going to go until possibly a little bit longer. They're trying to find out what it is that they can do to help these renters and landlords also alike. The landlords have recently sued because they're not able to protect some of the tenants that are living in these apartment buildings, because while this moratorium is good for people who need it, there are people who are abusing it. And I will give you a personal experience that I am going through actually right now, where I discovered that there are people, and I won't even say names of people, I'll just say people. There are some people who, before the pandemic happened, the landlord was, the previous landlords, I will say, all they were concerned about is collecting rent, and they weren't concerned about the other tenants' safety in the building. And so they allowed troublesome tenants to stay in the building as long as they showed up with the rent. There was no problem. However, what ended up happening as time went along, these tenants began to stop paying the rents. And this was before the pandemic, and they let their rents get behind, and then they started in with criminal or unlawful activities. Anywhere from drug dealing to destroying a public property of a building, loitering, and on down the list of whatever it could be. Something that would be grounds for being evicted. So now the owners of the building switched ownership, and the new owners are stuck with the problem, and now they're trying to evict, and they couldn't. And this pandemic happened, and they weren't able to evict these people because these moratoriums, while they're helping people who need the moratoriums, they're also helping the baddies. The ones who probably are more than likely taking advantage of the fact that there's a pandemic and they can't be evicted right away. They're troublesome tenants, and so are troublesome neighbors. They're loud. All of the rules are out the window. Whatever rules were in place, now they feel they can violate them because they can't be kicked out right away. So the landlords are having trouble trying to get these evictions to proceed because there's a freeze on the rent, and there's also a freeze on evictions. And so that is the problem that has been happening. So this is really making it hard for the landlords and the tenants that really need the moratorium, and they aren't troublesome tenants. And so it makes it hard for everyone that has to deal with this. So you might hear an ice cream truck. That's a pet peeve of mine. I wish they would turn the music off. It's annoying. They'll soon pass. But yeah, it's yeah. So the reason why I'm doing this video is because I think the moratorium did help people who needed it, because you were able to talk to your landlords. Some landlords are more approachable, and they're able to work with their tenants, while you have other landlords who are not as approachable, and you feel intimidated, like you're walking on eggshells around them. And so that too might have to do with what kind of activity they've had to deal with in their buildings. And so maybe they treat everyone the same because they don't know what they're up against. And so I personally have seen some things that I have never seen before. And so I just wanted to mention what is scary about this whole thing now is that when this moratorium ends, which they cannot help everyone, because some people are behind in their rent, maybe $15,000, $20,000, $30,000. At that point in time, when they let the rent get out of control like that because of frivolous spending, or they're maxing out their credit cards, they paid rent with the credit cards, but they never paid the credit cards back. They basically exhausted their funds. They're buying TVs and scooters with it. I've seen this. They're not paying rent and they're squatting, basically. So we have squatters. And so there are squatters in the building. People who are abusing this moratorium. I want you to know that all of these people are not in a situation the same. They are not. And it makes it scary for those who really do need the moratorium. So it almost feels as though they needed to rework this moratorium and say, hey, if we got people who are abusing the moratorium, who are really like heavily delinquent, they were delinquent before the pandemic, we have to go ahead with these eviction proceedings of these people who are just using this moratorium as for hangout and squatting spots. And that's what's been happening. And in LA, these buildings, a lot of people have experienced being rent burdened. But that's everybody's story is not the same. Everybody's not how would you say they're not in distress where they all of a sudden the pandemic happened, they lost their job and they couldn't pay their rent. And that's the story that, don't let this look as though everybody's situation is that way. It isn't. Some people, there's a lot of people that were hurt by this pandemic financially. But before the pandemic, there were people who were troublesome tenants, and they were giving tenants, along with landlords, grief. It's hard to live next to squatters, people who don't follow rules, who they block your cars, or if there's one way in and one way out, there's drug dealing, or there's troublesome children. They're negligent about respecting the other tenant's space. They're destroying property or whatever it is. Those are the things that happen when people are not following things the right way and they're taking advantage of these moratoriums. So that's probably why the landlords are suing, because they feel as though they're losing money and they weren't able to pay their mortgages, and then they had these troublesome tenants and they weren't able to protect their other tenants who were good tenants, or at least decent tenants. I would say that really do need the help. And that relief fund, I checked into it. There's a relief fund they had in LA, and it only, I believe, covered like maybe 2 months worth of rent, but every little bit helps, when you're in a situation where you really need it. And unfortunately, it's not going to help people who are like 15 grand, or maybe 20 grand in a hole with back rent. And so that's the truth of the matter. The truth hurts. And so, not all of these people who want to end the rent are really, deserving of it. I hate to be this way. Whenever they say, oh, the moratorium is set to end, I hate to be like this, but sometimes I almost wish they would end it. Because when you live next to people who are rude, they're mean, they're abusing a situation, you want it to end. Even if it means some people are going to be put in a situation, it almost feels like maybe that's when you'll learn that, okay, you thought this was a party. You can just live rent free for a year and a half and take advantage of people who are suffering. And now you make them suffer more because they gotta live next to you, and you're abusing this situation, and you're doing all of your activities that are unlawful, and you're using this moratorium to do it. And that's sad, and that's what some of these people have been doing. That hasn't been everyone, but I wanted to be the one to be honest that not all of these people are deserving of rent just being canceled. Because, some of these people are taking advantage of the ones that deserve their rent to be canceled. Some people do need their rent, and they do need help. They do need the moratorium. However, you have these other individuals who are abusing it, and they're making people's lives miserable on top of the misery they're experiencing with this pandemic. So what do they propose for those situations? They need to separate out, weed out the negativity, weed out the tenants that are troubled tenants that have caused grief, that they were already behind before this pandemic. Do not lump them in with people who need this. So that's my thing on this. This is my opinion. So I don't know, how do you feel about this? I mean, there's article upon article about ending the rent, canceling the rent, and I'm all for it if people need it and they really are in a bind and they need help, or if they need assistance, if they could get another fund together to help people. But for these people who have just been abusing this whole thing, shame on you, because there are people who really do need this, and then you're making it hard for the ones that need it, and you never needed it. You just use this as a time, as an opportunity to take advantage of people's suffering and make other people miserable. So having said that, I'm going to let this video go. Like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for listening. I think this moratorium is going to continue for maybe another month or so. From what I heard, it could go as far as like October. I don't know, but it's not set in stone because they say a month-to-month basis. So depends on how it goes, and it could go as short, maybe less than October. I don't think it goes as far as October, so I'm not sure. So don't hold me to that. I just know it's a month-to-month thing. So at any moment when they do end it, though, this is what I believe. Before I let this video go, all hell's going to break loose, because they're not going to be able to help everyone, no matter what they do, no matter how many relief funds they try to get together, because not everybody's going to do the right things. So I think you need to protect yourself. Be careful, because I think because LA has had a history of riots, and they saw Portland and they see Chicago, and the troubles they're having with these troops coming down and igniting the rioting to turn. It started off as peaceful protests, and then they agitated people. They started abusing people and taking away their freedoms of speech to peacefully protest, and then it began to turn into a full-on riot. And that's the way I saw it to be. And I believe if they end the moratoriums, I believe maybe that they're fearing that that's what could come, because people will have this attitude: I've lost my job, I've lost my place to live, and this government, now I could lose my life because of this disease. I've already lost everything. What the hell? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make my voice be heard. And then as soon as they start deploying troops out here in LA, it is not going to be a pretty sight. And I think they are all talking about that. What do we do with all these newly homeless people? We already had a homeless crisis here in LA. And it just adds to the situation with the pandemic. If you put people and warehouse them in a large place, they're sure to catch the the disease will spread even more. It'll spike like wildfire. And you think you saw people die, the hospital systems will totally collapse. And it won't be a pretty sight. And so you'll basically be like, I'm picturing it to be as if it was to get to that on that level, just like that movie with Patrick Swayze, I believe his name was, where it was what, Escape from New York, Escape from LA, where everything, only that one was an earthquake, but this one is the pandemic. And where everything just, all hell breaks loose and the world changes as we know it and society changes and you just got this island of lawlessness. And, you only have one part where people are living normal and then this other side where it's complete chaos and they just totally they don't fund it, they don't put money into it, they just abandon shit. And so that is very scary to think about. I know it sounds very dystopian or maybe even worse than that, like living hell on earth pretty much. But that's what I was picturing it. I had some crazy dreams that it got to that point because they warehoused people and the disease began to spread and it just turned crazy. So anyway, sorry to scare you, but you never know. I'm not surprised anymore with this life of what twists and turns are around the bend. But anyway, I'm gonna let this video go. Like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for listening. And be safe out there. And boy, I'm telling you, I'm not surprised anymore what happens. Thanks for listening.